Our message title today is Forgiveness. And maybe some of you remember that I told you about a month ago that we were going to be doing this talk. It began when we were doing the releasing ceremony, when we were when I was thinking about the release, which we do between Christmas and New Year's each year. So much came forward for me about forgiveness, and so I was researching it a lot. And wow, there's a lot out there, a whole lot out there about forgiveness. So I want to share first the ideas from Ernest Holmes. He talks about forgiveness in 3 places in the Science of Mind textbook. And I found it interesting that it was only 3 places, but it really covers it all. So the first one that he talks about is divine forgiveness. The idea that divine forgiveness is eternal and ever available. It's not something that we have to suck up to the divine to get. We don't have to bargain. It already is present, awaiting our embracing of it. Ernest Holmes writes, "What a load is dropped from the shoulders of personal responsibility when we realize that the eternal mind holds naught against anyone." And so when we think of ourselves, it's like, yes, okay, nothing is being held against me for anything I've done or said other than that which I hold in my own mind. It's not being held by the eternal. And so that feels like a freeing experience. But what about when it's someone else? Can we still say the eternal mind holds naught against anyone? That statement, Holmes tells us, may be difficult to say if you feel that it might be unfair. And he uses the word virtue. So when he's talking about unfair, he's talking about the idea that God doesn't play favorites. We are each having nothing held against us, just like everyone else is having nothing held against them. And so it is for us to step into that same idea. If you feel that God should play favorites, because God doesn't. First of all, there are no chosen children. We are all the chosen ones. And second of all, there are none among us in our humanity whose virtue is above reproach. We have all, each and every one of us, fallen short of the mark sometimes, made a mistake, erred in some way. And I prefer all those words to sinned. I think that has a very negative connotation to it. But that is what it means. To sin is to have missed the mark. To miss the mark of loving compassion, kindness, peaceful resolve. So those who feel self-righteous, Holmes tells us, are also self-delusional. I love when he uses that word. I don't know if I've ever talked about that before, but he uses it quite often when we are ignorant of an idea. He says we are self-delusional, meaning we do not understand the truth of who we really are. And who are we, any one of us, to point a finger? And I always remember when I use that term, point a finger, when somebody told me, when you point a finger at somebody, 3 of them are pointing back at yourself. And when you're in Science of Mind, that has even greater meaning for us, because we know that all is God, all is good, all is love. He writes, virtue does not know that it is virtuous, and could it know, it would immediately become vicious. And so it is the truth that we must turn our eyes toward, because truth reveals an understanding within us that it is wisdom that helps us to keep our hearts open, and even open to those who have made mistakes or done harm in some way. And if not, we are taking the risk of, and I love his words here because they're going to come up again a little bit later, strangling our own life. When we are unable to forgive, we are doing harm to ourselves. Now, in this idea and this philosophy about forgiveness, we are not fostering wrongdoing. We are not saying that it's okay. But we are saying that gleaning an understanding of the frailties of human nature is important. And it's important that we are able to overlook what we cannot change. In the Bible it states, "To him who loves much, much is given." And so the second idea that Holmes talks about is entitled, "How God Forgives." And it's found in Matthew. And in the verse, we are told that God forgives us after we have forgiven. And so everything that I've just said about divine forgiveness is how it works, keeping our attention on that idea of loving kindness. Holmes suggests that we ponder that deeply whenever we're dealing with the idea of forgiveness, that we ponder the idea that God can only forgive us after we have forgiven. The reason for that is because we're working with the law of cause and effect. Is it even possible for us to be forgiven if we haven't delved into forgiving? We can receive only as we give. Life is an ever-evolving circle of giving and receiving. Our personal thought of animosity against anyone or many ones are outside the law. That isn't the way the law operates. And so we only strangle our own life in so doing. The ideas of animosity are not of a heavenly, blissful, peaceful consciousness, and therefore they are not of God. They are of the whole, but they are of the will of the thinker. And so as we open our inner mind and become receptive to good and good alone, we find our treasures, we find the blessings. Kathy shared a beautiful story today about how she found the blessing. And we're each unique individuals. Her path was unique to her as a center of God, a center in this universal presence. And each of us gets to determine for ourselves how we move forward. We take our thoughts to new highs in accordance with divine harmony and perfect love. And then the third place that Holmes talks about this is in the subtitle, "Jesus Forgives a Man and Heals Him." Again, this one comes from Matthew in his interpretation of it. And it's found in the scripture where Jesus forgives a man who is sick. The man is ill and he can't even get up and move. But the scribes overhear Jesus telling the man that his sins are forgiven. And the scribes are not pleased with Jesus telling the man this. And so Jesus turns to them and he asks them if it's easier to forgive or to heal. And then he demonstrates for them. To prove his point, he tells the man that he has just told, "Your sins are forgiven," to arise and take up your bed. And the man does. He gets up and he walks away. Ernest Holmes tells us that this is an example of, and I love these words, a great psychological law. Forgive and then get up and take up your bed. It is a psychological law. When we carry forward our burdens of the past, we devitalize our own body. Our thoughts create the thing. As the man was carrying the burden of self-condemnation, Jesus forgave his sins, his mistakes, which removed the weight from the man's consciousness. Removed the weight from the man's consciousness. No longer had to carry around that heavy load. So he then received the blessing of healing his physical being. We are forgiven at the level of our willingness to be forgiven, to forgive, and to turn our attention to the pure love of spirit.
I love that concept that you're talking about, how God forgives as we forgive. And the devitalization is when we forgive, we release the energy that we're holding on to, the mental energy. And God, as law, no longer has to work on that, so it releases it. So as we devitalize it, it gives law something else to work on instead. Forgiveness, as we've heard, if you've been here very long, you've heard it several times, forgiveness is an introspective practice. It's something we do to or for ourselves. It involves finding a part of ourselves that is not serving us well and releasing it, giving it back to the nothingness from which it came. Whatever that part is, it's a self-constructed entity. And if we have the power to create it, we also have the power to release it. We're having a conversation earlier about how it could possibly be just the imagination. And it's just something we've created in our own minds. If we can create that imagination, we can also release it and let it go. It's more than just cleaning out our closets. It's about a deep search, a deep clean, and releasing toxic energy from our unconscious. Sometimes it takes a lot of self-analysis to get to that, to find out where all these challenges in my life are coming from. Paramahansa Yogananda says millions of people never analyze themselves. Mentally, they are mechanical products of the factory of their environment. They don't know what or why they are seeking, nor why they never realize complete happiness and lasting satisfaction. By evading self-analysis, people go on being robots, conditioned by their environment. True self-analysis is the greatest art of progress. Self-analysis, looking within, finding that which is not working for us and discovering why it's not working for us. People often tend to exist in a loop. They're going around in circles because one foot is moving forward while the other is anchored in the past, and maybe anchored in the hole of unforgiveness. It's anchored in negative clutter that's no longer productive. And more positive thinking would quite often think would be the cure to that, but more positive thinking is not always the absolute answer. If one foot is forward thinking and the other foot is stuck in the mud, we're still moving in circles, maybe a little faster, but we're still not productive. It's like rocking faster in a rocking chair, still doesn't get us anywhere. Self-analysis enables us to uncover the cause of our quagmire so we can dig it up and throw it away or make a positive shift. The problem is, as Deborah said, that takes personal responsibility, personal initiative. We have to do some personal work. I recently had a challenge with my rotator cuff, and I was having trouble raising my arm higher than this or putting it behind my back, and it caused a lot of problems. And it was quite painful quite often, and so I talked to a friend of mine who had shoulder surgery on both of his shoulders, and he told me some horror stories about that. And he says, you know, you'll work along in life and you'll be able to do things, you'll compensate, you'll find other ways of doing things, but there will come a time when you'll know when you can't live with it anymore and you have to do something about it. The same is true of forgiveness. There will come a time when you realize not forgiving is hanging on to negative energy, which is toxic to me, and holding on to it is killing me and is not allowing me to do the things that I want to do, and all I have to do is shift and let it go. Why wait?
And sometimes that seems easier said than done. And there are many paths forward. It may happen in a moment, and it may take a little time, and that's okay too. There are two aspects to look at with forgiveness: forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others. And what I have found for myself is that whenever I believe it's forgiveness of others, there's always something about me too in there, because we are a part of the situation, the scenario. And a heart that forgives is a heart that heals. Forgiveness is an ongoing journey of freedom for you, the forgiver. Reverend Charles Geddes, a Science of Mind minister who has been here, if you were around during our ordination, he was here during that time. And he said, "My freedom is remembering that no person, no event, no place or thing can block the light that I am. My healing is to live from that premise." Nothing can block your light. So looking at this, I'm going to invite you, I'm going to share a little bit about some of the ideas that Mayo Clinic shares about forgiveness. But I invite you, if you're someone who scrolls online, to go into Mayo Clinic and Google forgiveness. They have very lengthy articles with all kinds of incredible ideas. So not only when we do not forgive does it affect our behaviors, but it also affects our body. It affects the way we show up in life, in our relationships, the way we attract in our relationships. Mayo Clinic says when someone you care about hurts you, you can hold on to anger and resentment or embrace forgiveness and move forward. Not move in those circles David talked about, where you're attached like a ball and chain in one area. If you hold on to pain, you are most likely the one who will pay for it, and oftentimes pay dearly. By embracing forgiveness, you also embrace peace and, in the beginning, hope. Hope that there is a new way to experience life until you are able to reveal it and step into it. And then it's a knowing. Forgiveness involves an intentional decision to let go of resentment and anger. That's a big one. Making an intentional decision that is no longer who you choose to be. Now, the act that hurt or offended you may or may not be with you forever. But working on forgiveness will definitely lessen the act's grip upon you. Lessen the grip that it has to keep you imprisoned in the walls of anger and tightness that doesn't allow ourselves to flow freely and full of life. Forgiveness also does not mean that you are forgetting necessarily or excusing. It doesn't necessarily mean making up with the person who caused the harm. They don't even have to know, because it's about you. And it's about the life that you deserve to live, that bloom that you get to be. forgiveness brings with it not only freedom that I spoke about, but a peace, an inner peace that is so complete that nothing can knock it off its track. Can it get a little wobbly sometimes? Something more to look at? Or the same thing again to look at? Sure. That peace is so centered within you that you know it, and it is you. There are quite a few benefits to forgiving: improved health and peace of mind. Forgiveness means you commit to making a change in the way that you think about a topic. It takes practice, and we have to move toward forgiveness. These are a few ways that Mayo Clinic suggests. I'm not sharing all of them. I do, again, encourage you to read their article. It's incredible. But a couple of these I thought were new to me. Maybe I did them automatically, but to state them. The first one is recognize the value of forgiveness. I don't know that I ever just sat and thought about that, but all these ideas that David and I are sharing together, they are the value of us being willing to forgive, to release, to let go of something that occurred in the past that still holds us in place. And at the same time, it's important to acknowledge our emotions around it, to recognize how those emotions are playing out presently in our life. If we're holding on to angers and resentments, hurt, poor me, if we're holding on to those ideas, we are still playing them out in our relationships today and the situations, and most probably the way we perceive ourselves. You don't deserve that. You don't deserve to do harm to yourself. You are a beautiful center in the universal allness that is. You deserve all good. So choose to forgive. And then Mark Twain says, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. That is for us. Whenever we feel that a situation or a person has crushed us, it is for us to be that beautiful light, that beautiful fragrance that deals with what they can, and what you cannot change, move on, release, forgive, let go.
Our current thoughts are conditioned by our belief systems that were conditioned through past experience. That is the whole challenge with belief systems and belief patterns. I've talked about this a few times before, and I want to talk about it because it's in a different perspective, but talk about how our sensory receptors in the brain actually work. Research has shown that the human brain can process around 11 million bits of information per second. However, our conscious mind can only actively handle about 40 to 50 bits of information per second, meaning that most information processing happens subconsciously, under the surface. Our sensory receptors, our eyes, our ears, whatever our physical senses may be, pick up information from the environment around us, and when it comes in, it's like 11 million bits of information coming in at one time. We can't handle all that. It's mental overload. And so it passes through our memory banks in the brain. And the brain will say, well, I don't believe in that. It doesn't make sense to me. That's not clear. And so it throws all these 10 million, however, pieces out. So the 50 to 50 other things that are available to us that we actually believe in are actually allowed to go in. So we don't always actually believe what is there. We experience what we believe is there. Tricky thought, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we have what's called neuroplasticity, and that's the idea of training our brain to attract that which we do wish to experience. So when we begin to see things that we like a lot, we let those things come into the brain, we make a mental note of that, and we create dendrites, or neural pathways, that allow those things to move smoothly. And the more we actually experience those types of stimuli, the more of those neural pathways will begin to expand, and so the more receptive they become to what is going on in our environment. Our unconscious beliefs are founded on past experience that play a significant role in our current understanding. Our first line of defense could be infected by irrelevant influence by memories from the past. So what Billy Bob did to me 30 years ago that I have not resolved or I have chosen to hang on to may be influencing me in everyday decisions in my current life. Unresolved, unforgiven criteria contribute to current impressions. As you can see, we let unconscious bias skew data to inspire us to skew it to intake from, start over here. Tough sentence, I guess. As you can see, we let unconscious beliefs skew data intake from our physical senses. This fact alone should be enough to inspire us to do the personal work required to uproot hidden, negative, unconscious, unforgiven impressions from our memory files. Unforgiveness seems to be an obvious target to start our mental housekeeping.
Absolutely. So, we're not discounting any personal paths at all by any of this, but this is the way the law of cause and effect operates, and the forgiving has already been done. It is simply for us in our humanness to step into it. And so I know we did a releasing ceremony of that which we were ready to give up at the beginning of the year, but today you got a little piece of paper and a pen again. And even if it doesn't write, because you don't have anything hard this time, you can use your hand or just write it on it even if it doesn't show up. It is the burning papers. They usually call it the burning bowl, but I'm calling it the light of release, because whatever we put on that paper, and you know I'm one that usually says just think of the one word that sums it up, but I have 4 or 5 things on my paper. And all you have to do is bring it and drop it into the flame, and it will let go of it, and it will just disintegrate into the nothingness.
I was thinking about that earlier too, by the way, and the idea that we walk up there and you see the flash and you want it causes you to immediately want to release. And I thought, that's a really good thing.
That's good. So we'll all be the flash. So you're going to write a word or an idea on your paper now, and then when you feel ready, come forward to release it into the light. And then when you return to your seat, I invite you to close your eyes and simply feel peaceful. Feel well-being. Open up your physical body to allow the energy of life to move through. Did the light just go pink and blue? Oh, okay. I thought I was really seeing the lights there. And feel the well-being and feel the letting go of that which is holding you back from what Bibi so beautifully talked about today, blossoming, being the bloom of life, not playing small, but playing big on this big playground called life.